There are moments in history where people simply disappear, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers, theories, and a chilling silence where their stories should be. From ancient rulers to daring explorers, from entire civilizations to ordinary individuals stepping out for an errand, never to return, these mysteries tug at something deep within us. What happened to them? Were they victims of fate, foul play, or something even more inexplicable? Today, we're delving into 25 of the most haunting disappearances in history, cases that have baffled investigators, historians, and armchair detectives for centuries. Some of these names you'll recognize, household figures swallowed by the unknown, while others are quieter tragedies, their absence echoing through time with no resolution. Picture this: a ship found adrift, its crew missing but dinner still warm on the table. A pioneering aviator soaring into the clouds only to vanish mid-flight without a distress call. A child stepping into their backyard, swallowed by the ordinary until the ordinary becomes a nightmare. These aren't just stories, they're real lives, real questions with answers that may never come. And that's what makes them so compelling: the human element. The fear that it could happen to anyone, the unsettling realization that the world still holds pockets of the unexplained, even in our age of satellites and surveillance. This journey will take us from the fog-shrouded forests of early America to the vast, uncharted oceans where ships and planes go missing in the blink of an eye. We'll examine the evidence, the theories, and the eerie coincidences that keep these cases alive in our collective imagination. Some disappearances have clues, breadcrumbs that lead only to dead ends. Others are blank slates, leaving us to wonder if the truth is stranger than anything we could invent. So settle in, because by the end, you'll see history not just as a record of what we know, but as a shadowy archive of all we may never understand. The only question is, are you ready to step into the unknown? One of the earliest and most enduring mysteries in American history began in the late 16th century, when a group of over 100 English settlers established the Roanoke colony on the shores of what is now North Carolina. Funded by Sir Walter Raleigh and led by Governor John White, the colony was meant to be England's first permanent foothold in the New World. But when White returned from a supply trip to England in 1590, he found the settlement eerily deserted: no people, no signs of struggle, just empty buildings and a single cryptic clue. Carved into a wooden post was the word Croatoan, the name of a nearby island and the native tribe that lived there. What happened to those settlers? Theories have swirled for centuries. Some believe they integrated with the Croatoan people, seeking refuge from harsh conditions or hostile neighbors. Others suggest they fell victim to disease, starvation, or conflict with local tribes. There's even speculation of a desperate attempt to sail back to England, doomed by storms or shipwreck. But the most chilling possibility is that they were simply erased, vanished without a trace, their fate lost to time. A few tantalizing clues linger. Decades later, European explorers reported encountering Native Americans with gray eyes, uncommon among indigenous populations, or speaking fragments of English. Could these have been descendants of the lost colonists, or just coincidences twisted into wishful thinking? The truth may never be known, but the mystery of Roanoke endures, a ghostly whisper from the early days of colonization. It's a story that reminds us how fragile human ventures can be, how easily history swallows the unwary. And it all began with a single word carved into wood, a message that was either a plea for help or a final farewell. The Atlantic Ocean has swallowed countless ships over the centuries, but few have captured the imagination quite like the Mary Celeste. Found drifting near the Azores in December 1872, this merchant brigantine was in near-perfect condition, sails partially set, cargo intact, even the crew's personal belongings neatly stowed below deck. But the people gone. Not a single soul remained aboard, as if the entire crew had simply dissolved into the salt air. What makes this case so baffling is the sheer absence of answers. There was no sign of a struggle, no visible damage beyond normal wear, and a 6-month supply of food and water still on board. The lifeboat was missing, suggesting a hasty evacuation, but why abandon a seaworthy ship in calm weather? The last log entry, dated 10 days before the ship's discovery, noted nothing amiss. It was as if the crew vanished mid-routine, leaving behind a chilling snapshot of ordinary life frozen in time. Theories range from the plausible to the outlandish. Some point to the ship's cargo, over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, suggesting a sudden explosion or fumes that drove the crew to flee in panic. Others whisper of pirates, though nothing was stolen. More fanciful ideas include sea monsters or even abduction by extraterrestrials, but the truth likely lies in the ocean's unpredictable nature. A rogue wave, a sudden waterspout, or perhaps a mutiny gone horribly wrong, with the lifeboat meeting a grim fate at sea. What lingers is the eerie normalcy of the scene. A child's toy left on a bunk, a meal half-eaten. These small human details make the mystery personal, a reminder that real people, fathers, brothers, sailors with lives and loves, stepped off that ship into oblivion. The Mary Celeste became the archetype of ghost ships, a floating riddle that refuses to surrender its secrets. And like all great mysteries, it leaves us with more questions than answers, a blank page in the ledger of history where the story should be. Ambrose Bierce wasn't just any writer. He was a literary legend, a man whose sharp wit and darker-than-midnight stories earned him the nickname Bitter Bierce. By 1914, at the age of 71, he'd already lived a life full of enough drama to fill a novel. Civil War veteran, celebrated journalist, master of the macabre. But his final act would become his most mysterious. That year, he packed his bags, told friends he was heading to Mexico to seek the good, kind darkness, and rode straight into the chaos of the Mexican Revolution, never to be seen again. His last known letter, sent from Chihuahua in December 1913, drips with eerie foreshadowing. "If you hear of my being stood up against a Mexican stone wall and shot to rags," he wrote, "please know that I think it's a pretty good way to depart this life." The phrasing was classic Bierce, darkly humorous, almost flirtatious with fate. But was it a joke, a premonition, or a deliberate clue? Theories about his disappearance are as varied as his short stories. Some say he was executed by Pancho Villa's rebels, caught in the crossfire of a revolution that showed no mercy to outsiders. Others insist he staged his own vanishing act, a final twist from a man who'd spent his career toying with themes of fate and oblivion. There were even whispers of a more mundane end: malaria, a stray bullet, or simply collapsing in some forgotten canyon, his bones left to the desert. But Bierce wasn't the type to fade quietly. A man who once wrote, "Death is not the end. There remains the litigation over the estate," seemed to relish the idea of leaving behind a puzzle. Over the years, tantalizing sightings popped up like ghosts, an old gringo matching his description seen in a remote village, a prisoner claiming to share a cell with the missing writer. None were ever verified. What makes Bierce's disappearance so haunting is how perfectly it mirrors his own work. A man who wrote about the thin line between reality and nightmare, stepping into that very blur. Did he orchestrate his exit like one of his twisted tales, or did the revolution swallow him whole? We'll never know for sure, and maybe that's exactly how he wanted it. Some vanishings don't just defy explanation, they defy the very laws of nature. Take the Flannan Isles mystery, where 3 lighthouse keepers stationed on a barren rock off the coast of Scotland evaporated into thin air in December 1900. The lighthouse itself stood untouched, its light extinguished, its door unlocked. When a relief crew finally arrived after days of stormy delays, they found the men's coats still hanging by the door, a meal half-eaten on the table, and the logbook open to an entry describing brutal winds. But no bodies, no struggle, no trace of where Thomas Marshall, James Jucat, and Donald MacArthur had gone. Theories spiral like the treacherous waves around those cliffs. Some say a rogue wave swept them into the sea while they repaired equipment on the cliffs. Others whisper of foul play, a fight, a mutiny, even whispers of a ghostly presence on the island. The most chilling detail. The log's final entry noted Marshall had been very quiet, jucat secular. A word that doesn't exist. Was it a frantic misspelling of secular or something darker? The ocean offers no answers, only the hollow echo of a question. How do 3 experienced keepers vanish from a place designed to beacon others home? Then there's the case that turned a Christmas Eve into a lifetime of torment for the Sodder family of Fayetteville, West Virginia. In 1945, as the Sodders slept, fire engulfed their home. George and Jenny Sodder managed to escape with 4 of their 9 children, but 5, ranging in age from 5 to 14, were never found. No remains were recovered, not even teeth, despite the fact that bone doesn't vanish in a house fire. The fire itself was suspiciously hot and fast, with neighbors claiming to see strange men near the house earlier that night, and later, reports of the missing children being spotted in cars, even on a passing train. The Sodders became their own detectives, uncovering eerie clues. A ladder they always kept propped against the house was mysteriously missing that night, as if someone didn't want them to escape. Phone lines were cut. A witness swore they saw the children being carried into a car. The family even received a cryptic photo years later, a blurry image of a young man labeled Louis Sodder, one of the missing boys, but the lead went cold. Was it a kidnapping? Revenge against George, an outspoken critic of Mussolini's regime? Or something even more sinister, buried in the ashes of a house that burned too clean, too completely? 2 disappearances separated by decades and an ocean, yet bound by the same agonizing question. How do people vanish from sealed rooms, from watched homes, leaving behind only shadows where their lives should be? The lighthouse keepers and the Sodder children remind us that sometimes the most frightening mysteries aren't about what's taken, but what's deliberately left behind. A half-eaten meal, a cut phone line, a door left open to the wind. These aren't just clues, they're taunts, whispers from the dark that say, "Look, but you'll never see." The world might remember Thomas Edison as the father of motion pictures, but history nearly wrote a different name, Louis Le Prince. In 1890, this French inventor was on the verge of revolutionizing entertainment with his groundbreaking motion picture camera, a device that could capture moving images years before Edison's kinetoscope. But just as Le Prince prepared to patent his invention and unveil it to the world, he boarded a train in Dijon, France, and stepped straight into oblivion. No witnesses, no luggage left behind, just an empty seat where a man destined to change the world should have been. Theories swirl like smoke around his disappearance. Some claim Edison, fiercely protective of his own experiments with moving images, orchestrated Le Prince's vanishing to eliminate a rival. Others point to a family dispute. Le Prince's brother had died by suicide years earlier, and some suggest financial troubles or personal demons led him to stage his own disappearance. Then there's the eerie twist. His son, Adolf, who later testified in a lawsuit against Edison, was found shot dead in New York under mysterious circumstances. Coincidence or something more sinister? The impact of Le Prince's absence echoes through film history. Without him, the timeline of cinema stuttered. Edison's team rushed to patent their own devices, and the credit for inventing motion pictures solidified around names like the Lumiere brothers and Edison himself. But fragments of Le Prince's work survive. A 2-second clip of his family in their garden, shot in 1888, is now recognized as the oldest surviving motion picture. It's a haunting glimpse of what might have been had the man behind the lens not vanished into the fog of history. What makes this case so chilling isn't just the mystery of his fate, it's the staggering ripple effect of his absence. A single train ride didn't just erase a man, it may have altered the course of an entire art form. Was it corporate espionage, a tragic accident covered up by time? Or did Le Prince, foreseeing the cutthroat world of patents and profit, choose to walk away from his own legacy? The truth remains as elusive as the flickering images he left behind, a ghostly prelude to the silver screen. The Glenelg Beach in Adelaide should have been a place of pure childhood joy on that scorching summer day in January 1966. But by nightfall, it became the site of Australia's most infamous missing persons case, one that would haunt the nation for generations. 9-year-old Jane Beaumont, 7-year-old Anna, and 4-year-old Grant vanished without a trace during a short trip to the shore, their empty beach towels left behind like discarded shells. Witnesses reported seeing the children playing with a tall, blonde stranger earlier that afternoon, a man who carried Anna on his shoulders and bought them meat pies. But when their parents arrived to collect them at the agreed time, the sands held only silence. The investigation that followed was massive. Police combed the area, dredged nearby waterways, and interviewed thousands. But no bodies were found, no ransom demands arrived. The case cracked open Australia's collective sense of safety, sparking new laws about child supervision and reshaping how missing persons cases were handled. For years, tips poured in, sightings of the children on remote farms, in cars, even overseas. Each lead dissolved into dead ends, the most chilling theory. That the man on the beach was a predator who'd been watching, waiting, and struck with horrifying precision. Suspects emerged like shadows. One prime figure was convicted child killer Derek Percy, who'd later confessed to murders around the same era, yet never provided conclusive details about the Beaumonts. Then there was Bevan Spencer von Einem, a serial murderer linked to other abductions, but evidence connecting him remained circumstantial. Even notorious figures like the family cult responsible for other disappearances were scrutinized. But without physical proof, the truth slipped through the cracks of time. What makes this case so unsettling isn't just the scale of the lost 3 bright lives erased in broad daylight, but the way it lingers. Decades later, fresh leads occasionally surface. A woman convinced she'd spotted Jane in New Zealand, a demolition crew uncovering possible bones beneath a warehouse near the beach. None have brought closure. The Beaumont parents died without answers, their grief a quiet storm that never passed. Today, the case stands as a grim reminder of how innocence can vanish in plain sight, how a single summer afternoon can fracture into endless questions. And somewhere, whether in unmarked graves or stolen lives, those 3 children remain frozen in time, their laughter forever lost to the wind. Harold Holt loved the ocean, its vastness, its unpredictability, the way it could make even a prime minister feel small. On December 17, 1967, that love became his undoing. The 59-year-old leader of Australia went for a swim at Cheviot Beach near Melbourne, despite the choppy waters and warnings from his companions. Witnesses watched as he waded in, his head bobbing among the waves, and then he was gone. Not a cry for help, not a struggle, just silence where a world leader should have been. The search that followed was unprecedented. Navy divers, helicopters, even local fishermen scoured the coastline for days. But the man who'd steered Australia through conscription debates and closer ties to the United States had vanished without so much as a floating shoe. In the absence of a body, theories erupted like riptides. The official explanation was straightforward. Holt, an experienced but overconfident swimmer, had been dragged under by the treacherous current. But in the shadows of the Cold War, whispers grew louder. Some speculated suicide. Holt had been under immense political strain, his health faltering. Others spun tales of espionage, that he'd been snatched by a Chinese submarine or staged his disappearance to defect. The wildest rumor that he'd been whisked away by a UFO, a theory so absurd it inspired a cheeky memorial plaque dubbing the site the Harold Holt Memorial Swimming Center. What lingers isn't just the mystery, but the legacy. Holt's vanishing forced Australia to confront the fragility of leadership, no Prime Minister since has been allowed to swim unprotected. The Holt Memorial Pool in Melbourne stands as both tribute and dark joke, a place where the water's edge holds more than just chlorine. But perhaps the most haunting detail is this: Cheviot Beach itself, once a popular spot, eroded away years later, as if the ocean had taken the man and the memory of where he'd last stood. The truth may be simpler than the myths. The sea doesn't discriminate between kings and commoners. It only takes, and in Holt's case, it took a prime minister, leaving behind a nation's worth of questions and a coastline that refuses to hold its secrets. The Ural Mountains should have been a winter wonderland for 9 experienced hikers in January 1959. But what happened on the slopes of Dyatlov Pass would turn their expedition into one of history's most chilling enigmas. Led by Igor Dyatlov, a group of students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute set out on what should have been a routine trek through the snowy wilderness. But when they failed to check in, rescuers uncovered a scene so bizarre it seemed ripped from a nightmare. Their tent was found torn open from the inside, as if they'd fled in pure terror. Footprints led away into the snow, some barefoot, others wearing only socks, vanishing into the darkness of a sub-zero night. The bodies turned up in stages, each discovery deepening the mystery. 2 were found near a cedar tree, dressed in scraps of clothing torn from the others. 3 more lay in a line, as if trying to crawl back to camp. The remaining 4 weren't uncovered until months later, buried under layers of snow, and their injuries defied logic. One had a fractured skull, another missing her tongue and eyes. Most unsettling of all, some of their clothing showed traces of radiation. Theories have spun wilder than a blizzard. The official Soviet report blamed an unknown compelling force, a phrase that explains nothing but hints at official unease. Some point to avalanches, yet the slope was too gentle, and the hikers were too skilled to panic without cause. Others whisper of secret military tests, pointing to reports of strange orange lights in the sky that night. Could they have stumbled upon a covert experiment, triggering a lethal cover-up? Then there are the darker suggestions: indigenous Mansi tribesmen angered by trespassers, yet no signs of struggle or defensive wounds were found. Infrasound from the wind driving them to madness. Possible, but it doesn't account for the physical trauma. Even paranormal explanations creep in: Yeti attacks, alien encounters, or cursed ground. The truth may be simpler or far stranger than we can imagine. What lingers isn't just the horror of their final moments, but the questions etched into every detail. Why would seasoned hikers slash their only shelter and flee into certain death? What force could fracture ribs without breaking skin? And why the radiation, a detail that claws at the edges of rationality? Decades later, Dyatlov Pass remains a riddle wrapped in snow, a story where even the facts feel like fragments of a nightmare. The mountains kept their secrets that night, and some say they still do, whispering warnings to those who dare to listen. The man who defined the sound of an era with swing classics like In the Mood and Moonlight Serenade stepped into a single-engine plane on December 15, 1944, and became music's most enduring vanishing act. Glenn Miller, America's beloved bandleader and a morale-boosting force for troops during World War II, was traveling from England to Paris to prepare for a holiday performance when his Nordine Norseman aircraft disappeared somewhere over the English Channel. One moment the skies carried the faint hum of an engine, the next only silence, no wreckage, no distress call, just the empty horizon where a cultural icon should have been. Miller's disappearance struck a chord worldwide. At the height of his fame, he'd traded sold-out concerts for USO tours, his music offering soldiers a taste of home amid the chaos of war. That final flight was supposed to be routine, a short hop from an RAF base in Bedford to liberated Paris. But winter weather turned treacherous, with fog so thick even seasoned pilots hesitated. Some speculate his inexperienced pilot, Flight Officer John Morgan, became disoriented, plunging them into the icy waters below. Others point to the grim reality of friendly fire. Declassified documents later revealed Allied bombers jettisoning unused explosives over the channel that day, a common practice that might have struck Miller's plane without warning. Then there are the stories that refuse to fade, the ones that suggest Miller never boarded that plane at all. Decades later, a French journalist claimed the bandleader survived the crash only to die in a Paris brothel, his identity hidden to avoid scandal. Another rumor insisted he'd been on a secret mission to negotiate with Nazi officials, silenced to protect wartime secrets. Even Miller's widow received anonymous letters insisting her husband was alive, living under an assumed name. But the most haunting theory isn't about conspiracy, it's about legacy. Miller's orchestra continued performing after his disappearance, his music outliving the man by decades. In a way, he never really vanished. His sound still fills dance halls, his recordings defy time. That duality, the man gone, the music eternal, makes his disappearance uniquely poignant. The Glenn Miller Army Air Force Band's final recording, made just days before his flight, closes with "I'll Be Seeing You," a ballad about absence and memory. It's as if the music knew what history would not, that some disappearances aren't endings but echoes, and Miller still swings on, a ghost note in the soundtrack of the century. It was the morning after graduation in Springfield, Missouri, June 7, 1992, when friends arrived at a small, single-story home on Delma Street and found the door unlocked, the lights on, and 3 women missing without explanation. 19-year-old Susie Streeter and her friend Stacy McCall, both fresh from their high school commencement, had crashed at Susie's mother Cheryl Levitt's house after a night of celebrations. By dawn, all 3 were gone. Their purses sat lined up on the kitchen counter, car keys tucked inside, cigarettes rested in ashtrays, half-finished drinks on the table. Even Cheryl's beloved schnauzer, Cinnamon, was left behind, yapping anxiously in the empty house. It was as if the women had vanished mid-breath, plucked from their lives without warning. The scene defied logic. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, nothing stolen, just an eerie stillness where 3 vibrant lives should have been. Police initially wondered if the girls had left on their own, but Cheryl, a meticulous homemaker, would never have abandoned her dog or her purse. And why leave behind Stacy's contact lenses when she couldn't see without them? The only faint clue, a shattered porch light globe, as if someone had unscrewed it to darken the home's entrance. But even that led nowhere. Suspects emerged like ghosts, each more haunting than the last. There was Robert Cox, a convicted kidnapper who'd been in Springfield that night, his alibi shaky, his van seen near the neighborhood. Then the gravel-voiced prison informant who claimed 2 inmates confessed to burying the women in a nearby quarry. Those searches turned up nothing. Even a local mechanic became a person of interest after a witness reported seeing him pressure washing his van at 4 in the morning, its interior stripped bare. But without physical evidence, the leads dissolved like mist. Then came the psychics, drawn to the case like moths to a flame. One insisted the women were buried under a parking garage. Excavations revealed only dirt. Another swore they'd been taken to an abandoned farmhouse. Police found dust and echoes. The most chilling tip came years later when a caller told Cheryl's sister, "The answers are in the walls." Investigators tore the house apart, cutting into drywall, sifting through insulation. Nothing. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed them. What makes this case so unsettling isn't just the absence of clues, it's the way ordinary details twist into nightmares. A porch light, a dog's whimper, the mundane becomes menacing when you realize whatever happened, it was fast, quiet, efficient. Someone knew how to make people disappear without a trace. Or perhaps they just got lucky, a perfect crime, executed in the dead of night, leaving behind only questions and 3 empty chairs at the kitchen table. Decades later, the house still stands, new owners, fresh coats of paint, but in Springfield, the whispers never faded. Some say if you listen closely on a quiet June night, you can still hear Cinnamon barking at shadows, as if sounding the alarm for 3 women who never came home. The Amazon has swallowed explorers before, but few as determined as Percy Fawcett. By 1925, the British adventurer had spent years chasing rumors of a lost civilization hidden deep in the jungle, a place he called Z. His final expedition included only his son Jack and Jack's best friend, Raleigh Rymel, a trio armed with machetes, outdated maps, and unshakable confidence. Their last known communication, a letter handed to a guide returning to civilization, declaring they were crossing into uncharted territory near the Xingu River. Fawcett wrote, "We will reach Z if it exists, and it does." After that, silence. Search parties combed the jungle for decades. Some found traces, a rusted compass, a name carved into a tree, but no bones, no journals, no definitive proof. Theories spiraled. Had they been killed by hostile tribes, succumbed to disease or starvation, or had they actually found their mythical city, choosing to vanish into its secrets? The jungle offers no favors to those who seek answers. Even Fawcett's wristwatch, discovered years later in a remote village, only deepened the mystery, traded like a trophy, stripped of its hands as if to mock time itself. Half a world away, the Atlantic Ocean holds its own grudge against explorers. The USS Cyclops, a massive Navy collier ship, vanished in March 1918 while transporting manganese ore from Brazil to Baltimore. 306 souls were on board, the largest non-combat loss of life in U.S. Navy history, yet not a single lifeboat or distress signal was ever found. The ship's last radio message reported nothing amiss, just routine weather before it slipped beneath the waves somewhere near the Bermuda Triangle. Officially, the Navy called it presumed lost, a hollow phrase that explains nothing. Some blame storms, though no squalls were recorded along its route. Others point to the unstable cargo. Heavy manganese shifting in rough seas could have capsized the vessel in minutes. Then there's the wartime angle. German U-boats prowled those waters, though no submarine claimed the kill. The wildest theory, a mutiny fueled by the ship's notoriously volatile captain, George Worley, whose erratic behavior had crewmen whispering about his sanity. Two disappearances, both swallowed by their own ambition. Fawcett sought glory in the green hell of the Amazon. The Cyclops fell victim to the ocean's indifferent hunger. One a man who refused to turn back, the other a ship that never had the chance. What lingers isn't just the absence of answers, it's the scale of their vanishing. An entire naval crew erased, a legend who became his own myth. Both remind us that some frontiers don't give up their secrets, no matter how hard we search. The jungle grows over footprints, the sea smooths out wreckage, and history is left with only echoes where stories should be. November 24, 1971 began as a routine flight from Portland to Seattle, until a man in a dark suit and sunglasses handed a note to a flight attendant. What it said would become aviation legend: "I have a bomb." Thus began the saga of D.B. Cooper, the alias used by the skyjacker who would pull off one of the most audacious crimes in history. After demanding $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes, he calmly smoked cigarettes and drank bourbon while the plane circled to meet his demands. Once the ransom was delivered in Seattle, he released the passengers, ordered the crew to fly south, and somewhere over the rugged forests of the Pacific Northwest, lowered the plane's rear stairs and leaped into the night with the money strapped to his body. No body, no parachute, just a phantom who walked into the clouds and never walked out. The FBI dedicated decades to cracking the case, chasing over 800 suspects, from disgruntled aerospace engineers to bankrupt pilots with grudge. One compelling lead was Richard McCoy, a Vietnam vet turned rogue who pulled a near-identical heist 5 months later, though he was eventually caught. Then there was Kenneth Christiansen, a former Northwest Airlines employee with insider knowledge and a sudden inheritance matching the ransom amount. The most chilling theory, that Cooper didn't survive the jump at all. The terrain where he likely landed, dense, rain-lashed wilderness, has swallowed hikers with far more preparation. In 1980, a boy digging near the Columbia River unearthed rotting bundles of $20 bills, their serial numbers matching the ransom. But Cooper gone, like the money scattered by time and weather. What makes Cooper's disappearance so magnetic isn't just the mystery, it's the myth. Here was an everyman who outsmarted the system, a folk hero wrapped in shadows. Did he spend his last moments plunging toward treetops, or did he land softly, disappearing into a small town with a new identity? The lack of answers birthed a cultural obsession. Songs, films, and even a wave of copycat hijackers borrowed his blueprint. The FBI closed the case in 2016, conceding the trail had frozen over, but the legend burns hotter than ever. Because in a world of surveillance and satellites, Cooper's vanishing act feels like the last magic trick, proof that sometimes the boldest escape is into thin air. Vermont's Green Mountains hold more than postcard-perfect foliage. They conceal one of America's strangest clusters of disappearances, a stretch of wilderness so eerie it's earned the name, the Bennington Triangle. Between 1945 and 1950, 5 people vanished without a trace along this remote corridor near Glastonbury Mountain, their cases defying logic and feeding whispers of something far darker than mere coincidence. The most infamous among them, 18-year-old Bennington College student Paula Weldon, whose December 1, 1946 hike on the Long Trail became a nightmare etched into local history. Weldon set out in broad daylight, wearing a bright red parka that should have made her impossible to miss. Witnesses reported seeing her ask for directions near the trailhead, then stride confidently into the woods. By nightfall, she was gone. Search parties combed the area for weeks, sniffer dogs, helicopters, even psychics drawn to the case. But no scrap of clothing, no footprint, not even a single thread of that crimson jacket was ever found. The forest had swallowed her whole. What makes the Bennington Triangle more than just a series of tragic accidents are the chilling parallels between the cases. 4 years before Weldon, a 74-year-old hunting guide named Mitty Rivers vanished while leading a group near Glastonbury. Like Paula, he knew the terrain intimately, yet he stepped off the path and into oblivion. Then came James Tedford, a war veteran who literally disappeared from a moving bus in 1949. Passengers swore he'd been napping in his seat moments before the next stop, but when the doors opened, only his belongings remained. Theories range from the grim to the uncanny. Some blame wild animals or treacherous terrain, though no bodies were ever recovered. Others point to serial killers, yet no evidence links the victims. But the most enduring legends speak of forces beyond explanation. Local Abenaki tribes long considered Glastonbury cursed, a place where the wind carried voices and the earth opened without warning. Modern reports describe UFO sightings, strange lights darting above the tree line in the dead of night. There's even talk of portals, patches of forest where time twists and space folds, snatching the unwary into some other dimension. Is the Bennington Triangle a hotspot for the supernatural, or just a tragic convergence of bad luck and rugged wilderness? The answer may lie somewhere in between, a place where harsh reality and folklore blur. Because sometimes the most unsettling truth isn't that we don't have answers, but that the land itself seems to guard them. Jimmy Hoffa wasn't just a union boss, he was a force of nature, a man who clawed his way from stockyards to the pinnacle of labor power, only to vanish from a Detroit parking lot in July 1975 as if the earth itself had swallowed him. The last confirmed sighting, outside the Matches Red Fox restaurant where he was supposed to meet 2 mob-connected associates, one a reputed hitman, the other a lone shark. Hoffa arrived early, ordered a drink, and then nothing, no witnesses, no struggle, just a man with enough enemies to fill a phone book erased in broad daylight. Theories about his fate are as tangled as his ties to organized crime. Some say he was shot in the back of the head, his body stuffed into a steel drum and incinerated at a Jersey City landfill. Others swear he's buried beneath the 50-yard line of Giant Stadium, a project built by mob-linked contractors who allegedly poured concrete over evidence. Decades later, ground-penetrating radar would scan sections of the stadium's old site, revealing nothing but urban legend. Then there's the tip that sent FBI agents digging up a Michigan horse farm in 2021, convinced a late gangster's nephew had confessed to burying Hoffa there. They found horse bones, rusted tools, but no teamster. The wildest twist, Hoffa's own decades-long dance with the underworld might have scripted his ending. As Teamsters president, he'd funneled union pension funds into mob-backed casinos, earning favors and enemies. When he left prison after a pardon and tried to reclaim power, old allies saw him as a liability. The timing fits. His disappearance came just as the government tightened its grip on labor racketeering, making loose ends dangerous. But without a body, even the FBI's meticulously mapped timelines and wiretaps lead to dead ends. What makes Hoffa's case endure isn't just the mystery, it's the symbolism. A man who built an empire on muscle and menace reduced to a ghost story. Every tip, every shovel of dirt turned whispers the same question. Can you ever really bury the past, or does it linger like the faintest stain under fresh concrete, waiting for the light to hit just right? 49 years later, the parking lot's still there, the restaurant still open, and somewhere, maybe beneath a strip mall or a stretch of interstate, Jimmy Hoffa remains the ultimate unfinished business. The Arctic holds its secrets tighter than the ice grips the land, and none have clung to their mystery quite like the doomed Franklin expedition. In May 1845, Sir John Franklin led 129 men aboard the ships HMS Erebus and HMS Terror into the frozen north, armed with cutting-edge technology and enough supplies to last 3 years. Their mission, to chart the elusive Northwest Passage, a shortcut through the top of the world. But by 1848, both ships and every soul aboard had vanished into the white silence, leaving behind only cryptic notes and a trail of bones. The first clues emerged years later, scattered across the tundra like breadcrumbs leading to a nightmare. Inuit hunters spoke of pale men stumbling through the snow, their lips black with scurvy, their bellies empty. Some described ghastly scenes: corpses sawed apart, bones cracked open for marrow. These accounts, dismissed as folklore at first, would later be corroborated by forensic evidence, skeletal remains with knife marks consistent with butchering. The whispers were true. Faced with starvation, Franklin's men had turned on each other, their final days a descent into unthinkable desperation. Modern technology has peeled back layers of the mystery without ever fully solving it. In 2014, a team using sonar located the Erebus perfectly preserved under the ice, its deck still littered with artifacts, buttons, plates, even a pair of mittens folded as if someone meant to return for them. 2 years later, the Terror was found 60 kilometers away, its hull eerily intact. Divers exploring the wrecks discovered untouched cabins, journals reduced to mush by seawater, and clues that hinted at a doomed escape attempt. Some men had tried trekking south, dragging lifeboats laden with useless luxuries like silver cutlery and monogrammed handkerchiefs, their priorities tragically out of step with the brutal reality closing in around them. But the most haunting discoveries came from the permafrost itself. On King William Island, researchers exhumed the body of John Hartnell, a young sailor buried in the ice. His skin, tanned by over a century of cold, clung to his skeleton like parchment. Tests revealed lethal levels of lead, likely from the expedition's poorly canned food, suggesting the crew was poisoned long before starvation or cannibalism took hold. Other graves told similar stories: men felled by pneumonia, tuberculosis, or sheer exhaustion, their frozen faces twisted in silent screams. What makes the Franklin expedition so compelling isn't just the horror, it's the hubris. These were the best-equipped explorers of their age, armed with steam engines, libraries, even early daguerreotype cameras. They scoffed at Inuit survival techniques, relying instead on British discipline and canned goods. And the Arctic punished that arrogance without mercy. Today, the wrecks stand as memorials to human ambition and its limits, their hulls whispering the same lesson. Nature writes its own rules, and not even the mightiest empire can bend them. The Northwest Passage was eventually conquered, but Franklin's men never lived to see it. Their legacy is a cautionary tale etched in ice, a reminder that some frontiers demand more than courage. They demand humility. The skies have always been a realm of possibility and peril, but for two aviators, they became the stage for vanishing acts that still haunt us. In July 1937, Amelia Earhart, already a global icon for shattering gender barriers in aviation, set out on what should have been her crowning achievement, a circumnavigation of the globe. Her Lockheed Electra carried her and navigator Fred Noonan across continents and oceans, but somewhere over the vast emptiness of the Pacific, near Howland Island, radio contact crackled into silence. The last transmission, a frantic report about low fuel and lost bearings, became the final echo of a legend. Search planes scoured thousands of square miles, but no wreckage, no life raft, not even a scrap of metal was found. The ocean, it seemed, had claimed them both, but Earhart's disappearance birthed theories as sprawling as the Pacific itself. The official explanation, a crash landing after running out of fuel, seems the simplest, yet inconsistencies nag at investigators. Why did distress signals continue for days after the presumed crash? Some point to the tiny atoll of Nikumaroro, where bones and artifacts found years later hinted at a castaway's desperate survival. Others spin darker tales that Earhart and Noonan were captured by Japanese forces, their plane mistaken for a spy craft in the tense pre-war Pacific. Declassified documents even suggest the U.S. government may have quietly searched the Marshall Islands for traces of the duo, fueling whispers of a cover-up. 4 decades later and halfway across the world, another pilot's voice would vanish mid-transmission under even stranger circumstances. In October 1978, 20-year-old Frederick Valentich took off from Melbourne in a small Cessna, headed for King Island over Bass Strait. His routine flight turned surreal when he radioed air traffic control about an unidentified craft hovering above him, long, metallic, with green lights and an eerie ability to outmaneuver his plane. His final words, "It's not an aircraft," were followed by 17 seconds of bizarre metallic scraping sounds, then silence. Despite one of Australia's largest search operations, not a single piece of wreckage or oil slick was ever found. Valentich's case remains a cornerstone of UFO lore, but skeptics offer more terrestrial explanations. Some suggest he became disoriented, mistaking his own plane's lights reflected in the water for an otherworldly craft, a phenomenon known as the leans. Others propose he staged his disappearance, citing his fascination with UFOs and a notebook left behind detailing how to fake one's death. But the absence of physical evidence lingers like a shadow. What binds these two vanishings isn't just the void they left behind. It's the way they reflect our deepest fears about the unknown. Earhart, a symbol of human ambition swallowed by the indifferent sea. Valentich, a young man voicing the unthinkable before static swallowed his words. One case embodies the limits of exploration, the other, the terror of encountering something beyond explanation. The skies grant no easy answers, only the wind howling through the gaps in our understanding. And perhaps that's why these stories endure not just as mysteries, but as reminders that some horizons refuse to be mapped. The night of February 24, 1978 should have been like any other for 5 friends from Yuba City, California. A basketball game, a quick stop for snacks, then home before curfew. But somewhere along those familiar backroads, Ted Weiher, Bill Sterling, Jack Madruga, Jack Hewitt, and Gary Mathias took a wrong turn into one of America's most baffling disappearances. All 5 men were developed, mentally disabled, living in a group home and thriving under structured routines. Yet hours after cheering at a college game, their '69 Mercury Montego was found abandoned on a remote mountain road, its doors unlocked, heater still running, and a single bag of chips left on the seat. What followed was a search that uncovered layers of eerie contradictions. Weeks later, rescuers stumbled upon a lone Forest Service cabin 19 miles from the car, its door forced open from the inside. Inside, investigators found Ted Wyher's emaciated body wrapped in 8 blankets, his unshaven face hinting at weeks of survival. One of his shoes was missing, replaced by a mismatched sneaker. A coffee pot held melted snow, suggesting someone had attempted to stay alive. But the strangest detail, the cabin's pantry was stocked with enough canned food to last months untouched. Why starve with salvation just an arm's reach away? Mathias's military boots were found nearby, his psychiatric medication scattered in the snow. The other 3 men vanished without a trace, their bones never recovered despite decades of searching. The official explanation that the men, disoriented by a snowstorm, panicked and fled doesn't account for the chilling specifics. Why drive 26 miles up a treacherous mountain pass they'd never visited? Why abandon a working car with gas in the tank? And why did Wyher, the only one with survival training from his time in a fire camp, not eat the available food? Theories twist like the mountain roads they disappeared on. Some locals whisper about foul play, a run-in with drug growers, or a sadistic hunter exploiting vulnerable men. Others point to Mathias, whose schizophrenia could have triggered a psychotic break leading the group astray. Then there's the most unsettling possibility that an unseen force, whether human or something stranger, herded them toward that cabin like lambs to slaughter. What lingers isn't just the mystery, it's the cruel irony. These were men who depended on routine, who carried reminder notes to buy milk and take their medication. Yet in their final hours, every rational choice was inverted. The cabin's untouched food, the abandoned car, the mismatched shoes, each detail feels like a taunt, a riddle scribbled in the snow by unseen hands. The Yuba County Five didn't just vanish. They left behind a trail of clues that defy the very logic they relied on to navigate the world, a haunting reminder that sometimes the most terrifying disappearances aren't about where the lost go, but why they never tried to come back. In June 1989, a Polaroid photo surfaced in the parking lot of a Florida convenience store, an image so chilling it sent investigators racing to confirm its origins. The photo shows a young woman with dark hair, gagged and bound with rope, her hands behind her back as she glares into the camera with unmistakable intensity. Next to her lies another figure, younger and similarly restrained, wrapped in a blanket. The woman bore a striking resemblance to Tara Calico, a 19-year-old who'd vanished 10 months earlier while riding her pink bicycle near her New Mexico home. The photo's discovery ignited a firestorm of speculation. Was this proof Tara had been abducted, a hoax designed to torment her grieving family, or something even darker, a snapshot of a crime in progress discarded like a taunt? Tara's case had already been steeped in eerie details. She vanished on September 20, 1988, during her usual bike ride along Highway 47. Witnesses reported seeing a light-colored pickup truck tailing her, and her Walkman was later found crushed on the roadside, as if dropped in a struggle. When the Polaroid emerged, Tara's mother, Patty, was certain it was her daughter. The woman's nose, the shape of her lips, even a scar on the leg matching Tara's childhood injury, all seemed to align. But skepticism crept in. The FBI analyzed the photo and declared it inconclusive. Some experts argued the woman's hairline didn't match Tara's. Others pointed out the photo's pristine condition despite allegedly being tossed in a parking lot for months. Then came the swirl of theories. Local rumors suggested Tara had been hit by a car belonging to the sons of powerful families, her death covered up to avoid scandal. Others theorized the photo was staged by Tara herself, a desperate cry for attention from someone who'd run away. But the most unsettling possibility, that the image was real, but the bound woman wasn't Tara at all. In 2000, a Florida woman came forward claiming she and her boyfriend had taken the photo as a prank. Yet investigators found inconsistencies in her story, and Tara's family refused to accept it. Without the original negative or a confession, the photo remains suspended between evidence and enigma. What makes this case endure isn't just the question of Tara's fate, it's the way the Polaroid became a Rorschach test for our deepest fears. Parents saw their own children in that blurred figure. True crime enthusiasts dissected every pixel for clues, and somewhere, whether in a grave or a new life, Tara Calico's disappearance echoes, a reminder that even in the age of cameras and forensics, some faces in photographs refuse to give up their secrets. The photo still exists locked in an evidence file, its truth fading like the chemicals on that old Polaroid, each year a little fainter, a little further from answers. The Zapruder film isn't the only footage capturing John F. Kennedy's assassination, but it might be the only one whose creator ever stepped forward. In the chaos of Dealey Plaza on November 22, 1963, dozens of witnesses raised cameras, yet one woman's presence has tormented historians for decades. Clad in a brown overcoat and a headscarf tied under her chin, a style that earned her the nickname the Babushka Lady, she stood calmly in the grass near Elm Street, filming the motorcade as gunfire rang out. While others ducked or ran, her camera kept rolling, capturing an angle no other known footage did. Then, as sirens wailed and blood stained the pavement, she simply walked away. The FBI pleaded for her to come forward. Newspapers ran sketches of her face, but the woman with potentially the clearest view of the shooting never identified herself, taking whatever she saw that day to the grave or somewhere far more sinister. What makes her disappearance so baffling isn't just the absence of her footage. It's the way she seemed to vanish into the crowd with deliberate anonymity. Unlike Abraham Zapruder, who immediately handed his film to authorities, the Babushka Lady didn't flinch as history unfolded around her. Witnesses later recalled her moving methodically, even stopping to adjust her camera's focus after the fatal shot. This wasn't the behavior of a panicked bystander. It was the calm precision of someone who knew exactly what she was recording. When researchers later analyzed photographs of the scene, they noticed something chilling. Her lens pointed directly at the Texas school book depository at the exact moment Oswald allegedly fired. Had she captured the sniper's nest in action? Or worse, did she film something that contradicted the official narrative? Over the years, a handful of women have been proposed as the Babushka Lady. Beverly Oliver, a nightclub singer, came forward in the 1970s claiming to be her, but her story crumbled under scrutiny when she couldn't produce the camera she described. Another theory points to Marilyn Sitzman, Zapruder's assistant, though photos disprove the match. The most compelling lead might be a woman named Grace, mentioned in a 1970 police report as someone who'd sent partial footage to the National Archives, but the film was dismissed as irrelevant and later lost. The truth may be simpler, that she was an ordinary visitor who, realizing the explosive nature of her recording, chose silence over the spotlight. Yet the most unsettling question remains: what happened to the footage itself? Some researchers believe the FBI secretly identified and intimidated her into surrendering it. Others suggest she was no bystander at all, but an operative planted to document the event for shadowy players, a theory fueled by reports of two men escorting her from the scene. Either way, her absence speaks volumes. In a case riddled with missing evidence and altered testimonies, the Babushka Lady's film might have been the key to unlocking the truth. Instead, it's become one more ghost in the assassination's haunted gallery, a woman who saw everything and chose to let history keep guessing. Her legacy isn't just a missing reel of film, it's a testament to how easily truth slips through our fingers. For 60 years, we've dissected blurry photographs and grainy videos, searching for answers in pixels and shadows. But somewhere out there, whether destroyed or deliberately hidden, a single roll of film holds the clearest view we'll never see. The babushka lady didn't just disappear, she took a piece of history with her, leaving us to wonder if some mysteries are meant to stay unsolved. On the evening of November 22, 1987, Chicago television viewers settling in to watch Doctor Who encountered something far stranger than any alien invasion. Mid-broadcast, the screen flickered to static before revealing a masked figure wearing an eerie, distorted grin, an uncanny impersonation of the then-popular Max Headroom character. For nearly a minute, the intruder delivered a surreal monologue, giggling through a modulated voice while waving a glow stick and smacking his rear with a fly swatter. The bizarre spectacle ended as abruptly as it began, the hijacker signing off with the cryptic phrase, "Your love is fading." What made this incident unforgettable wasn't just its audacity. It was the chilling realization that someone had breached the defenses of a major broadcast network, leaving behind only taunting breadcrumbs and a mystery that persists decades later. Technical analysis revealed the intrusion required deep knowledge of broadcast engineering. The hacker likely transmitted their signal from a high vantage point near the Tower Studios transmitter, overpowering the legitimate broadcast with military-grade precision. Insiders noted the equipment needed would have been expensive and rare in the 1980s, pointing to someone with professional training, possibly a disgruntled station employee or a rogue contractor. The hackers' familiarity with WGN and WTTW systems was unnerving. They even mocked station technicians during the hijack, rattling off internal call signs like an inside joke. Yet despite an FBI investigation and rampant speculation in the tech community, no suspects were ever identified. Theories about the hijackers' motives spiral from the mischievous to the sinister. Some believe it was an elaborate prank by a brilliant but bored engineer, a digital equivalent of a bank heist without the theft. Others argue the intrusion was a deliberate stress test, probing vulnerabilities in broadcast security ahead of the digital age. The most unsettling possibility, that the hacker was sending a veiled message about media control, their garbled audio snippets containing hidden references to corporate censorship. One chilling moment in the transmission featured a distorted voice whispering, "The clowns will eat me," a phrase that spawned endless conspiracy theories. What makes the Max Headroom intrusion so enduring isn't just the technical wizardry, it's the brazenness of the performance. In an era before viral stunts, this hacker didn't just exploit a system, they turned it into theater, donning a mask that mirrored the very artifice of television itself. The incident forced broadcasters to overhaul their security protocols, yet the hacker's identity remains as obscured as the static they left behind. No demands, no manifesto, just a flickering, grinning specter who proved that even the airwaves weren't safe from the human hunger to disrupt and disappear without a trace. The SS Waratah was meant to be Australia's pride, a state-of-the-art passenger liner dubbed the Southern Titanic for its sheer size and luxury. But unlike its ill-fated namesake, the Waratah never even had the chance to sink in infamy. It simply vanished somewhere off the coast of South Africa in July 1909, taking 211 passengers and crew into a silence so complete, even the ocean seemed determined to keep its secrets. Built to withstand the roughest seas, the Waratah had departed London bound for Cape Town and then Adelaide, her holds packed with cargo and her cabins filled with families, businessmen and emigrants. The last confirmed sighting came from another ship, the Clan McIntyre, which spotted the Waratah's distinctive silhouette near Durban on July 26. The crews exchanged signals, nothing amiss, just routine navigation. Then the horizon swallowed her whole. When the liner failed to arrive in Cape Town, panic set in. The first search parties launched within days, scouring the coast where currents might have carried debris. Nothing. Not a life jacket, not a chair, not even an oil slick. The British Admiralty dispatched gunboats to comb the waters, while private vessels joined the hunt, drawn by hefty reward offers. But the Indian Ocean offered no answers, only the relentless rhythm of waves against empty hulls. Theories about the Waratah's fate split between the plausible and the spine-chilling. Some point to the storm that raged days after her disappearance, a tempest powerful enough to capsize any ship caught unaware. Yet the Waratah was built for such conditions, her bulkheads reinforced, her engines robust. Others whisper of rogue waves, those 100-foot walls of water that can snap a ship like matchwood. Survivors of similar disasters described waves as tall as apartment blocks, but without wreckage, even this explanation feels incomplete. Then there are the darker possibilities. The Waratah had already gained a reputation for instability. Passengers on her maiden voyage complained of excessive rolling, and one naval architect reportedly refused to sail on her, calling her design fatally flawed. Could a sudden shift in cargo have sent her plunging bow first before anyone could send a distress call? Or did something more sinister occur, a boiler explosion, a collision with a hidden wreck? The wildest theories even suggest she fell victim to a Bermuda Triangle-like phenomenon, a patch of ocean where compasses spin and ships blink out of existence. The most haunting detail isn't the absence of evidence, it's the whispers that lingered for decades. In the 1920s, a prospector claimed to find Waratah's wreck in a remote riverbed miles inland. He described gold coins scattered in the mud, a child's doll perched on a rusted railing. By the time authorities investigated, floods had reclaimed the site. Decades later, sonar scans revealed a ship-shaped anomaly off the wild coast, but storms prevented further examination. Even modern technology, which has located wrecks like the Titanic, has failed to pinpoint the Waratah. What makes this disappearance so unnerving is the totality of it. Ships leave traces, wooden debris, personal effects, the stubborn buoyancy of sealed compartments. But the Waratah and her passengers dissolved into the deep as if they'd never existed. No final messages in bottles, no ghostly radio signals picked up by passing vessels. Just an empty stretch of ocean and a question that refuses to fade. How does an entire steamship, a floating city of steel and steam, vanish without leaving a single clue behind? The answer may lie beneath layers of silt and time, or perhaps the sea intends to keep this one for itself. Lars Mittank's story begins like any young traveler's summer adventure, a vacation in sunny Bulgaria with friends, nights out in the coastal city of Varna, and the kind of carefree energy that comes with being 28 and far from home. But by July 8, 2014, that ordinary trip twisted into one of Europe's most baffling disappearances. It started with a seemingly minor incident. A bar fight left Mittank with a ruptured eardrum, an injury doctors assured him would heal. Yet something in his behavior shifted. He became paranoid, convinced strangers were following him, whispering that people wanted to hurt him. His friends, concerned but unaware of the coming nightmare, flew home as planned, believing Lars would follow after a final medical checkup. He never did. What happened next was captured in grainy CCTV footage that still chills viewers to the bone. Inside Varna Airport's medical clinic, Mittank sat waiting for his examination, then abruptly bolted. The video shows him sprinting through the terminal, dodging security, his movements frantic as if fleeing an unseen threat. He dashed out of the airport past parking lots and vanished into a dense forest bordering the runway. No wallet, no phone, just a man running from something only he could see. The search that followed sprawled across weeks. Police combed the woods with dogs, helicopters scanned from above, and volunteers plastered the city with missing person posters. Yet not a single trace emerged, no clothing, no footprints, not even a discarded water bottle. The most perplexing clue: a witness claimed to spot Mittank days later near a highway over 100 miles away, disoriented and barefoot. But by the time investigators arrived, the trail had gone cold again. Theories about his fate range from the tragic to the surreal. Some believe his head injury triggered a psychotic break, sending him wandering into the wilderness where exposure claimed him. Others whisper darker possibilities, human trafficking, or even foul play linked to the shadowy underworld of Bulgaria's coastal resorts, the most haunting hypothesis. That Lars, trapped in a delusion, sought refuge in the forest's vastness, becoming another nameless soul swallowed by the trees. What lingers isn't just the mystery, it's the fragility the footage exposes. One moment, a young man sits in a clinic. The next, he's a blur of panic, his fear so palpable it leaps through the pixels. The forest where he disappeared stretches for miles, a green labyrinth that's yielded bones from decades-old missing persons cases. Perhaps Lars's remains are there too, hidden under layers of leaves and time. Or perhaps, like the camera that caught his final sprint, the truth is still rolling, waiting for someone to press play. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass incident was a puzzle wrapped in layers of Soviet-era secrecy and whispered folklore, but modern science is finally chipping away at the ice. In 2020, a team of researchers from Switzerland's Snow and Avalanche Research Institute applied cutting-edge computer modeling to the case, simulating how snow behaves under the precise conditions recorded that fatal night. Their conclusion, a rare and terrifying phenomenon known as a slab avalanche, could explain the hikers' frantic escape. Unlike traditional avalanches, which roar down mountainsides with unmistakable force, slab avalanches occur when a dense layer of snow fractures silently beneath the surface, collapsing like a trapdoor. The team recreated the Dyatlov group's campsite on a 30-degree slope, prime conditions for such an event, and found that even a small shift could trigger a localized slide strong enough to collapse tents and inflict the kind of blunt force trauma seen on the victims' bodies. But the avalanche theory doesn't answer everything. Critics point to the absence of classic avalanche signs, no massive snow deposits, no branched fractures in the snowpack. And what about the radiation on their clothing or the missing eyes and tongue of one victim? Here, science offers grimmer explanations. Forensic experts note that scavenging animals, particularly Arctic foxes, frequently target soft tissues first in frozen corpses. As for the radiation, hikers' clothing was found to have traces consistent with thorium lantern mantles common in mid-century camping gear, dispelling Cold War-era fears of secret weapons tests. Yet the most damning blow to conspiracy theories came from painstaking analysis of the hikers' final movements. Infrared imaging of the footprints showed no signs of panic at first. The group walked orderly toward the tree line before dispersing. This suggests a rational, if desperate, survival strategy, splitting up to seek help after the initial disaster. The 9 sets of footprints often cited as proof of a chase. Likely just the overlapping trails of rescuers who contaminated the scene days later, but science hasn't entirely erased the shadows. Why did experienced mountaineers cut their way out of the tent instead of unzipping it? Why were some victims dressed only in undergarments while others wore layers scavenged from the dead? The answer may lie in a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing, where hypothermia victims in their final delirious moments tear off clothing due to a false sensation of burning heat. Combine this with the disorienting effects of a nighttime avalanche, no moonlight, howling winds masking sound, and you have a recipe for the incomprehensible. The truth of Dyatlov Pass may be both simpler and sadder than the myths, a perfect storm of bad luck, brutal physics, and the cruel tricks the human mind plays when death closes in. Yet the case endures not because it's unsolvable, but because it forces us to confront how thin the line between order and chaos really is. Even with satellites and supercomputers, nature reminds us that some mysteries aren't meant to be cracked, just remembered. The hikers didn't vanish into a government plot or a Yeti's clutches. They were swallowed by the mountain itself, a place where science and legend still wrestle in the snow. For centuries, the fate of the Roanoke colonists was written in whispers and speculation until science began turning those whispers into hard evidence. Recent archaeological breakthroughs have chipped away at the myth, revealing tantalizing connections between the lost settlers and the indigenous Croatoan people. Ground-penetrating radar surveys near Cape Creek on Hatteras Island uncovered a ring of copper ear adornments and fragments of Elizabethan-era pottery buried alongside native artifacts, a cultural collision that suggests more than just trade. These weren't stray objects dropped by passing Europeans. They were personal items worn and kept close, hinting at integration rather than slaughter or starvation. Then came the genetic smoking gun. In 2020, researchers analyzing DNA from present-day descendants of the Croatoan tribe identified rare European markers dating back to the late 16th century, a time frame that aligns perfectly with Roanoke's disappearance. One family line even carried a surname eerily similar to Darby, a name listed among the original colonists. These aren't vague coincidences, they're biological breadcrumbs leading straight from the vanished settlement to living descendants. Technology has amplified these discoveries in ways earlier generations couldn't imagine. LiDAR mapping, which strips away dense forest canopy to reveal hidden structures, exposed what appear to be fence lines and building foundations 50 miles inland from Roanoke, far beyond where historians thought the colonists might have traveled. Excavations there yielded a rusted 16th century axe head and a slate writing tablet inscribed with partial letters, possibly a child's practice slate. The most haunting find, a small lead token stamped with a lion, identical to those used as makeshift currency by desperate English settlers, yet for every answer new questions emerge. If the colonists integrated with the Croatoan, why didn't they leave clearer records? Some scholars argue they may have been absorbed during a time of upheaval, their European identities erased by necessity. Others point to the White Doe legend among the Lumbee tribe, which speaks of a pale-skinned ancestor who taught her people English prayers, a story passed down for generations. Even the infamous Croatoan carving takes on fresh meaning, not a distress signal but a deliberate trail marker like breadcrumbs left for a future that never came looking. The real revelation here isn't just about solving a cold case, it's about rewriting the narrative of early America. Roanoke was long framed as a cautionary tale of European fragility, a failure swallowed by the wilderness. But these discoveries paint a messier, more human story, one of adaptation, survival, and the quiet blending of cultures. The colonists didn't vanish. They may have simply stepped into a world that history wasn't ready to see. And now, 4 centuries later, the land itself is finally telling their story, not in the ink of explorers, but in the soil, the DNA, and the enduring echoes of those who learned to belong. What ties these disappearances together isn't just the absence of answers, it's the eerie patterns that emerge across centuries and continents. From the frozen wastes of Dyatlov past to the suffocating silence of the Mary Celeste, from the jungle's grip on Percy Fawcett to the digital void of the Max Headroom hijacker, these stories share a haunting rhythm. They unfold with clues that mock us: porch lights shattered, cryptic carvings in wood, half-eaten meals left behind, as if the universe itself is teasing our hunger for resolution. Notice how often the vanished were experts in their fields, seasoned hikers, accomplished pilots, trained lighthouse keepers. Their competence makes their disappearances more unsettling, not less. If even the skilled can be plucked from existence, what hope do the rest of us have? And then there's the silence, no screams, no final messages scratched into surfaces, just empty spaces where lives should be. It's this silence that lingers, making us strain to hear whispers from the past. Consider how many of these cases pivot on single, surreal details. A word carved into a post, a lone Polaroid in a parking lot, a masked face hijacking the airwaves. These fragments dangle before us like keys to locked doors we can't find. The longer we stare, the more they seem to blur. Were they clues at all, or just red herrings left by time itself? Humanity's obsession with these mysteries isn't just about solving puzzles. It's about confronting the boundaries of our understanding. Every vanished person forces us to reckon with how little we truly control, how vast the gaps are in our maps. We send submarines to find wreckage in the abyss, scan satellite images for lost cities, sift through DNA for traces of the missing, yet some stories resist closure. And perhaps that's why we keep returning to them. They're not just history's loose ends, they're mirrors reflecting our deepest fears of being forgotten, of stepping into the wrong shadow, of leaving behind a world that moves on too easily. So what do you think happened to these lost souls? Did they stumble into hidden tragedies or something beyond our comprehension? The comment section is your detective's notebook. Share your theories, your favorite deep dive sources, the cases that keep you up at night. And if you're hungry for more stories where history's clock stops mid-tick, hit subscribe, because the past isn't finished speaking yet. It's out there, whispering in the static of old recordings, in the grain of faded photographs, in the spaces between the facts we think we know. The only question left is, are you